All right, welcome to the public square. And for good measure, we have a bell of the square today.
Great
and
looking bell.
it's going to be ringing aloud on 99.3 Nigeria Info on Public Square, where we discuss all the big and significant issues in politics in Nigeria. Today, we will be looking at former President Olusegun Obasanjo's open letter to President Muhammadu Buhari, which has polarized conversation. Set a lot of tongues wagging. But first we'll have the idea segment with IOB. Great to have IOB back. And remember, you can follow the program on Twitter. It's at Public Square NG. That's our Twitter handle. At Rotimi Sankore, one of our handles also too. At Ninjama, IOB is at Ninjama. Also at Ideas Radio NG. At Aogo Obo at Nigeria Info FM. Tweet at us questions or comments you have. We will take them when the time comes together with calls. But great to have you, Ayo, and Rotimi Sankore.
I have to say that
asking for you last week when you were away.
I think that the new studio, I have to say, is a real improvement, and congratulations on, even though I'm not, it's my baptism in the new studio. And hi, Rotimi.
Someone said, Baba, our youngest national affairs analyst, just said then was that it's like the Oval Office.
When he gets to the Oval Office, he'll be able to tell the difference. But you know, it's interesting that we mentioned the Oval Office, because in the occupant of the Oval Office and the previous occupant of our own equivalent, which is well, I don't know what shape the office is, but the building itself is is Aso Rock, have been causing quite a stir with yet another of his famous open letters to a sitting head of state, and having in the run-up to the previous elections advised the president to resign, the former President Obasanjo has now written another letter in which he talks about the wave of insecurity in the country, and quite frankly ends up by saying that the buck stops on the desk of the president. So I thought, Rotimi, that because, as I said in my tweet announcing this program, that a lot of people have spent a lot of time pointing fingers at the former President Obasanjo and saying, oh, it started in your time, or during your time X number of people were killed, or it didn't just start with President Buhari, and so on and so forth, all of which, to my mind, are valid criticisms. But I think that the issues that concern us now are firstly the actual insecurity itself and the accountability for that, and then the responsibility, again another word for accountability, that all of us, whether high or low, who have a voice in public affairs, the responsibility that we have for not heaping fuel onto flames, but rather for encouraging people to focus on the actual issue at hand. And that's why I said that there were some echoes of the occupant of the White House, because the perception was that rather than address the criticisms of his policies, he decided to play, well, I was going to say play the man, not the ball, but in this case he decided to play the woman and not the issues that they had been raising. So I don't know how you see it, Rotimi.
Well, so President Obasanjo, former President Obasanjo, said in his letter to President Buhari that the content of the letter should be available to all those who can help in proffering effective solution. And that's why he put it in the public domain. So earlier in the week, when this was in the headlines, we were looking at it on the newspaper review, and someone called and said, one of our contributors on the phone said, but you know, they have access to each other. I could have called him aside and availed him of this wisdom in
But that's
private.
the response to every time ex-President Obasanjo writes a public letter. The response is always, but he has access to these people. and so on. But I think that really the issue is not so much that he could have had access to the president. I think the concern, which goes to the second part of my my intro, is that in drawing attention or asking the public to contribute, what he's really doing is fanning the flames of ethnic division, and you know, keep on saying that whatever may be the grievances of Fulanis, it's perceived as Fulanis and so on. He's actually, or you know, talking about menace is perceived as a Fulani menace unleashed by the Fulani elite, and so on and so forth. I think that kind of language reinforces the perception that the problem of insecurity lies at the door of one ethnic group, and that therefore the solution lies in dealing with that ethnic group. Whereas I think that if the former president wanted to elicit solutions to the insecurity issue, he would have framed it as recognizing that actually that this is a problem which has been bedeviling Nigeria from time. And
well, how about the place where he says that the perpetrators who are all being suspected, rightly or wrongly,
well, you see,
as Fulanis?
it's a way of reinforcing the message of this is about Fulanis, because if they are wrongly suspected of being Fulanis, how does it help us? You know, I had had cause to look at and in fact to circulate on our Ideas Radio NG Twitter account the clip where we were discussing the issue about President Buhari's inauguration day speech. And there, if I may repeat myself, we said that the reason why, even though there's this perception that black people are at risk in the United States, when we go there, we're not walking the streets and constantly, we don't sort of plan our journeys on the basis of you mustn't go at this time of day because as a black person you're at risk of this. We kind of assume that we are, despite the huge numbers that are killed, we are safe. And that's because the response of the law enforcement in that country is not to look at the identity of the perpetrator or to look at the identity of the victim, even though there is a perception that...
Except when the law enforcement are the perpetrators.
Well, but the point is that that their stance to the world is that whether you are black or white or any shade in between, that if you commit a crime in the United States of America, you'll be called to account. And I think that what has not helped in our own situation is, first of all, to continue presenting it as though this is an issue that only pertains to the Fulanis, and so that whenever people are arrested or kidnapped and they happen not to be Fulanis, or even worse, they happen to be people masquerading as Fulanis, as has been found in some of the people who have been arrested for kidnapping, that then becomes the issue. They're either Fulanis or they're not Fulanis. The issue is, have they been caught and brought to book?
So the ethnic coloration to the discussion is wrong. As we have always said on various programs, that and even explained that in many other countries where cattle has been big business, and
So
where
cattle rustling.
yes, there was cattle rustling, there were cowboys that were armed, and the cowboys in Texas or Mexico, Argentina or Brazil didn't misbehave because they were Fulani. You know, they misbehaved because herders or cowboys, as it then was, ran their cattle through farms. Farmers resisted, the cowboys were armed, the herders were not farmed. And there is a reason why, even till today, if you want to hire someone to do something for you, they say, don't bring me a cowboy. You know, so
Yes.
I mean, so there's a global template to this problem, which is not ethnic.
I appreciate that, but you see, in Nigeria, it now has an ethnic coloration. And whatever the evils or the sins of omission or commission in the past, the question is, to what extent have the current administration contributed to or removed from that perception and that narrative? And I think that where the former president's letter raises the issue of the responsibility of the president, we have to look at that, because the president at the end of the day is the one who is accountable for our security in Nigeria. And if people believe that if you're a criminal and you believe that if I masquerade as a Fulani, I can get away with my crimes, then that becomes part of the narrative, unless we hear the president and the law enforcement coming out clearly to say no. And then when we're talking about perception issues also, Rotimi, the persistent narrative in the country is that the president only trusts people like himself, which is to say the president has put the security architecture of Nigeria in the hands of people who are northerners, who are Muslims, and who are Fulanis. Now, the presidency needs to not only come out with its counter-narrative, but it also needs to come out with its counter-facts. And if it's not able to do that, then it reinforces that message.
I agree with you there that the presidency is not coming out with a counter-narrative that says this is not an ethnic issue. Again, going back...
No. The presidency may come out and say it's not an ethnic issue, but when people start counting ethnic heads, what is the answer that they get?
Yes, because the facts are not that, oh, for instance, this is the best person because X, Y, Z. So by not providing those explanations, he leaves people who don't know better or people who want to be mischievous to ratchet up the ethnic angle to things. And let me just give a quick example with the headsman issue. So if the presidency has come out to say, look, we are sorry about these headsmen that attack farmers or communities, we know that the solution that has been applied globally is to stop the cattle from moving on foot, and we are working towards providing railway, train, and we are going to buy in the meantime 500 trailers that these people can hire or use within XYZ business
That's
model.
where the issue is the herdsmen and the
Yes,
farmers.
yes, but I'm using that as an example because that is something that can easily be resolved using a global template. And then to say, oh, in many parts of the world, not only has the solution been to take the cattle off the roads or farms, but also there is a ranching, there is a business model for ranching, like poultry or whatever, which has been successful in many parts of the world and has no ethnicity tied to it, etc., etc. So,
etc., etc.
yeah, okay. So, so because I'm using the herdsman example because the question of land has, been brought into it. People are talking of settlement, colony, ancestral land, and
that's because the government could not
explain.
hear
in clear public policy
they could not
terms.
hear word when people said the word colony does not fly with the Nigerian people.
Yes. So that's why I'm using that example that, using words like colony and settlement in their public policy statements, reinforces the prejudice of people that wrongly say everything is ascribed to Fulani people.
Yes.
Because if they used words that said, so ranching is a business model that has been used globally and anyone can apply for the land, the Bank of Agriculture will facilitate.
Indeed, when we think about on our independence, our stamps used to have hides and skins as
Yes.
one of our major exports.
Yes.
And we all know about the origins of Moroccan leather in Nigeria. So definitely there are business models to be made. But I think we also have to go back to this issue of the leadership at the security, because people would say that it would be one thing if these people that the president has appointed have in fact diminished the level of insecurity. But what we can see is that the level of insecurity is rising. Now, it is possible because the more people talk about it, I mean, I was just exchanging another example on Twitter that who was asking, somebody was asking, why don't people say when they're victims of kidnapping? And there are many reasons why they don't, but certainly I know that it's long, I mean, especially when I used to worship at Archbishop Viney, you would frequently hear people being asked to intercede with their prayers for somebody who had been kidnapped. And you don't hear it so much now. Of course, I attend a smaller church. But the fact is that people no longer want to publicize the fact that they have been victims of kidnapping for a variety of reasons. One of which is that they believe that the police is not on their side when it comes that they are able to rescue their loved ones despite the police, not because of them. And I think that the police has not gone out of its way to let people know that if you are a victim of kidnapping, there's a particular area unit that you can refer to. Your security, your confidentiality is guaranteed, but we are going to trace the accounts into which this money was paid, and we're doing something beyond just descending on kidnappers and killing everybody, but we are going to do something which shows that we are going behind. We're doing some forensic examination of whether it's bank verification numbers, marked money, if we're dealing in cash, and so on and so forth, that we're going to be doing something which allows you to know that we are getting at those who are alleged to be behind this, if it's really not just a matter of people going into business for themselves. And I think also that, it's one thing to say that the head of the Air Force, the Army, the Navy are going to, but at the end of the day, you have a Chief of Defense Staff. And, if your Chief of Defense Staff has to be somebody that you as president are close to and that you love and you draw close, that's the person in the end that people are going to listen to. But you could do something which would also build confidence in people by letting by looking outside your immediate circle. And I'm afraid that the president's recent statement that he's going to be appointing ministers that are known to him didn't really, again, you don't know everybody. You have to do a proper headhunting, a non-discriminatory headhunting. And when the best head is hunted, you then get to know the person. That's what's expected of you.
Suggesting that is a paddy.
It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. The other thing about the security chiefs too is that because they won't admit to their shortcomings, and then they go on the attack. So the chief of army staff says, for instance, in the last few days, they've crushed all these terrorists and kidnappers and everybody, and those raising the matter are being political. And everybody can see that the evidence is to the contrary. So they divert attention actually from the fact that they are actually not winning, but more importantly, that the reasons that they are not winning are not just security. Because as I always say, at the moment now, so the last figures, roughly 8 million people, children are born in Nigeria every year. So the population trajectory alone, the unemployment, which the government itself has admitted that it's 23% now, and they are projecting that it is likely to hit 33% in 2020. This is one branch of the government saying unemployment is likely to hit 33% in 2020. the security side doesn't pay attention to that. To say, oh, actually, this is going to have security implications for us in terms of job skills, in terms
Well,
of...
I think that when we talk about national planning, it's always been a question, do we have a joined up government?
No, there isn't.
And I just wanted to, perhaps, before we close, to draw attention to just a news report that I saw about South Africa. And it's about an area of Cape Town called Cape Flats. And the area is a black and mixed race area, and the people are poor. And there's been gang warfare, which has killed, quote, more than 2,000 people, almost half gang related. That's what the provincial officials said.
Kidnapped in that place.
Well, I mean, we've seen the fake kidnappings and we've seen the genuine kidnappings. So, but the point is that there's gang violence in this poor area, and more than 2,000 people have been killed in the last 7 months. That's a huge number by any standard,
place.
For just an area of town. And what has the South African president done? He signed off last week on a decision to send the army into the Cape Flats. And, Cape Town actually has one of South Africa's highest murder rates. Last year, 3,674 people were murdered in Cape Town. But, so yes, you would know that there are some areas of South Africa, of Cape Town or South Africa, that you're not supposed to go if you don't know where you're going. But the point is that the army has, that the presidency has shown that they're taking visible control of the matter. Now, they don't have the same ethnicity problem that we have, but I would say that the recognition that actually those figures are much more frightening than anything Nigeria can offer. And yet, we Nigerians would not feel that the presidency in South Africa is somehow complacent or accusing people, because your first responsibility when you have citizens at risk, you deal with the problem, you silence those who are calling political issues by dealing with the problem, whether it is bringing back kidnapped girls, whether it is by dealing with robbers and so on. And of course, I have to say, the last thing I should mention is that one of the reasons why sometimes we don't hear from the police about what they've done with kidnappers is because of the fact that the police take a shortcut when they're dealing with some of these issues.
Can I just add quickly about South Africa before we go for the outbreak, that the South African government has also recognized that Cape Town as a whole, but also the Cape Flats specifically, has a deficit of schools, job skills for young people.
So they're taking away the causes of crime.
Yes, so as well as the security solution, they are taking away the causes and introducing long-term solutions. In fact, someone told me that they're actually thinking of demolishing the Cape Flats and rebuilding the area in a way that does not allow gangs to control choke points there and accelerate the gang warfare. So often it's the bigger picture that is really important.
Well, we need both the bigger picture, but we need immediate methods. And for both of those, the direction of the bigger picture and the long-term solution, and the immediate response, and the perceptions that have been raised by President Obasanjo's letter, all of those lie in the hands of the current administration. And what I think Nigerians would like to see is that it's not our fault. You silenced your critics by performing. With that, Rotimi, I have to end the ideas segment of the public square. I know that Aoro is anxious to ring his bell and call time on me, but I have wrung myself out. Please remember to check us out on the website, on Twitter, etc., etc., etc.
ETC.
No, etc.
All right, Public Square will be back after this break. Please don't go anywhere.